Is Iran on the brink of becoming the world's next nuclear power? With tensions simmering in the Middle East, this question is becoming more relevant than ever. But how did Iran reach this critical juncture, and what could this mean for the rest of the world? In today's video, we'll explore Iran's complex journey, from its rich historical legacy to its current position as a controversial player on the global stage. We'll dive into why the country remains isolated, its surprisingly low import and export figures, and the geopolitical tensions that have escalated its nuclear ambitions. We'll also look into two significant attacks Iran carried out on Israel, how Israel responded, and which nations are standing behind Iran in this delicate balance of power. Did you know that over 95% of you watching this video haven't subscribed yet? If you're enjoying the content and want to keep exploring fascinating stories with us, hit that subscribe button now, and it really helps us bring you even more amazing videos. Let's close that gap together. Iran's story stretches back thousands of years, from the powerful Persian Empire to the Islamic Revolution of 1979, which radically transformed the nation's identity and governance. Once a significant player in the ancient world, Iran was known for its cultural and political influence. However, the Islamic Revolution changed its trajectory, establishing a theocratic regime that heavily emphasized Shiite Islam, distancing itself from the West. Iran's nuclear ambitions began shortly after this, with the revolution creating a new chapter of defiance against what it saw as Western imperialism. Over the decades, these ambitions have both alarmed and angered many on the world stage. Iran's isolation on the global stage stems from a complex mix of historical, political, and ideological factors that date back several decades, primarily to the Islamic Revolution of 1979. This event radically altered Iran's relationship with the rest of the world, especially the West. The revolution overthrew the pro-Western monarchy of Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi and replaced it with an Islamic theocracy led by Ayatollah Khomeini. This new regime positioned itself in direct opposition to Western influence, particularly that of the United States and its allies. The slogan of the revolution, "Death to America," symbolized a clear break from the West, signaling a future of confrontation rather than cooperation. Iran's decision to adopt an anti-Western, anti-imperialist stance immediately led to diplomatic estrangement. Following the revolution, the U.S. embassy in Tehran was stormed by Iranian militants, resulting in the infamous 444-day hostage crisis, which poisoned relations between Iran and the U.S. for decades. This event marked the beginning of a long-lasting freeze in diplomatic ties and triggered the first wave of sanctions against Iran. The American response to the crisis, coupled with Iran's continued defiance, laid the foundation for its political and economic isolation. Additionally, Iran's revolutionary government adopted an aggressive foreign policy that sought to export its version of Islamic governance across the Middle East. This led to tensions with many of its neighbors, particularly Sunni-majority states like Saudi Arabia, which saw Shiite-led Iran as a threat to their regional influence. The rise of proxy wars between Iran and Saudi Arabia in places like Yemen, Lebanon, and Syria further alienated Iran from its Middle Eastern neighbors, leading to a deep divide between Shiite and Sunni factions across the region. International isolation deepened as Iran was accused of supporting militant and terrorist groups. This has positioned Iran as a destabilizing force in the eyes of much of the world, further complicating its relationships. The nuclear issue further solidified Iran's isolation. Iran's nuclear program, which Tehran claims is for peaceful purposes, has been viewed with deep suspicion by much of the international community. Fears that Iran could develop nuclear weapons led to multiple rounds of sanctions imposed by the United Nations, the United States, and the European Union. These sanctions severely restricted Iran's ability to trade, access financial markets, and even purchase basic goods such as medical supplies. The culmination of this pressure was the 2015 Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, JCPOA, a nuclear deal brokered between Iran and world powers, which temporarily eased sanctions in exchange for limits on Iran's nuclear program. However, in 2018, the U.S. withdrew from the deal under President Trump and reimposed harsher sanctions, isolating Iran even further. Adding to its geopolitical isolation is Iran's relationship with Israel. Iran's leadership has consistently called for the destruction of Israel, and Iran supports militant groups that oppose Israel's existence. This hostility, combined with Iran's pursuit of nuclear technology, has driven Israel to work closely with the U.S. and other Western powers to curtail Iranian influence, creating yet another reason for Iran's isolation from the international community. On top of all this, Iran's support for authoritarian regimes, such as the Assad government in Syria, has distanced it from countries that oppose these regimes. The Syrian civil war, in which Iran has been a key backer of Assad, has contributed to its pariah status, especially among nations that support Syrian opposition forces. Economically, the sanctions regime has devastated Iran's economy, limiting its ability to engage in global trade. The oil sector, which is the backbone of Iran's economy, has been hit particularly hard, with foreign companies largely unable to do business with Iran. This isolation has made it difficult for Iran to access foreign currency, invest in infrastructure, and provide for its population, further deepening its internal crises. While Iran does have a few key allies, such as Russia, China, and Venezuela, these relationships are based more on shared opposition to Western dominance than on deep-rooted cooperation. Even among these allies, Iran remains somewhat isolated, often viewed as a strategic partner rather than a true ally. Thus, Iran's isolation is the product of a unique blend of revolutionary ideology, regional rivalries, economic sanctions, and international distrust. Its geopolitical positioning has alienated it from the vast majority of the world, leaving it dependent on a few strategic partners while being economically and diplomatically cut off from much of the global community. Iran's economy has been heavily affected by sanctions that restrict its ability to trade freely on the global market. These sanctions were primarily put in place to curb Iran's nuclear program, with the hope that economic pressure would force the country to negotiate. As a result, Iran's exports, especially oil, have plummeted. It's also difficult for the nation to import essential goods, such as medicine and technology, which has led to widespread shortages. In addition to sanctions, internal economic mismanagement and corruption have also played a role in reducing Iran's trade capacity. Despite being rich in natural resources, Iran's limited access to global markets keeps its economy stagnant. Iran's ability to carry out powerful attacks, both directly and indirectly, can be attributed to several factors, including its advanced military capabilities, strategic use of proxy groups, and support from powerful allies. These elements combine to make Iran a formidable force in the Middle East, despite its economic challenges and international isolation. Iran has invested heavily in its military, especially its missile program, which has been central to its ability to conduct powerful strikes. The country has developed a range of ballistic and cruise missiles, some of which are capable of striking targets thousands of kilometers away. Iran's missile arsenal is among the most advanced in the Middle East, allowing it to strike not just its neighbors but also U.S. military bases and allies like Israel. One of Iran's key advancements has been its precision-guided missiles. These are capable of hitting specific targets with high accuracy, a crucial capability in any modern military conflict. In January 2020, for instance, Iran launched missiles at U.S. bases in Iraq in retaliation for the assassination of General Qasem Soleimani, causing significant damage without triggering a full-scale war, which demonstrated the accuracy and lethality of Iran's missile forces. Additionally, Iran's drone program has made significant strides in recent years. Iranian drones have been deployed in various conflicts, including in Syria, Iraq, and Yemen. These drones are used for both reconnaissance and offensive operations, giving Iran a strategic advantage in asymmetrical warfare. One of Iran's most effective tactics has been its use of proxy groups throughout the region. These are militias, often Shiite, that are loyal to Tehran and act on its behalf in various countries. The most well-known of these proxies is Hezbollah in Lebanon, which has become a major military and political force in the country and has conducted attacks against Israel and other adversaries. Hezbollah's involvement in the Syrian civil war, where it fought alongside Iranian forces to support the Assad regime, showcased the extent of Iran's influence and the power of its proxies. In Iraq, Iran supports various Shia militia groups, which have played a critical role in both fighting ISIS and asserting Iranian influence in Iraqi politics. These militias, collectively known as the Popular Mobilization Forces, PMF, have targeted U.S. forces and other Western interests in Iraq, acting as Iran's arm in its ongoing struggle with the United States. Similarly, in Yemen, Iran supports the Houthi rebels, who have been fighting the Saudi-backed government in a brutal civil war. The Houthis have launched missiles and drones at Saudi Arabian targets, including oil facilities, with some attacks being attributed to Iranian backing, both in terms of technology and training. By using these proxies, Iran can project power and influence without directly engaging in conflicts, reducing the risk of direct retaliation while still achieving its strategic objectives. These groups also provide Iran with a significant degree of plausible deniability, allowing it to claim non-involvement in certain attacks. Iran's ability to maintain its military capabilities, despite decades of sanctions, is partly due to its alliances with global powers like Russia and China. These countries have provided Iran with economic, military, and diplomatic support, enabling Tehran to circumvent some of the restrictions imposed by Western sanctions. Russia has been a key ally of Iran, particularly in the Syrian conflict, where both countries have supported the regime of Bashar al-Assad. Russia has provided Iran with advanced military technology, including air defense systems like the S-300 missile system, which enhances Iran's ability to protect itself from airstrikes. Russia has also cooperated with Iran in intelligence sharing and military operations in the region, making it a vital partner in Tehran's regional strategy. China is another critical ally, primarily in the economic sphere, but its support extends to military and technological cooperation. China has been one of Iran's main trading partners, buying significant amounts of Iranian oil even when sanctions were at their most stringent. In 2021, Iran and China signed a 25-year strategic cooperation agreement, which includes provisions for military cooperation, further solidifying their partnership. This relationship has provided Iran with the resources and technology to maintain its military capabilities. Iran has developed a robust domestic defense industry that allows it to produce much of its own weaponry, reducing its reliance on foreign suppliers. This includes everything from small arms to ballistic missiles and drones. While international sanctions have limited Iran's access to certain technologies, the country has become adept at reverse engineering foreign weapons and developing indigenous versions. For example, Iran has built its own versions of Russian and American drones and missiles, often improving upon the designs to suit its specific needs. This indigenous capability has been crucial in allowing Iran to maintain its military strength in the face of international efforts to restrict its access to advanced weaponry. In addition to its physical military power, Iran has developed significant cyber warfare capabilities. Iranian hackers have been accused of conducting cyber attacks against targets in the US, Israel, and Saudi Arabia, often causing disruptions to critical infrastructure. Cyber warfare allows Iran to strike at its enemies without risking direct military confrontation, adding another layer to its strategic arsenal. For instance, Iran has been linked to attacks on Saudi Aramco, one of the world's largest oil companies, which caused significant damage to the company's infrastructure. Similarly, Israeli infrastructure has been targeted by Iranian cyber attacks, illustrating Tehran's ability to engage in modern, non-conventional warfare. Lastly, Iran's ability to carry out powerful attacks is also fueled by its ideological commitment to opposing Western influence and Israel. This ideology, rooted in the 1979 Islamic Revolution, provides the Iranian leadership with a strong sense of purpose and justifies the country's actions on the international stage. Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, is particularly committed to defending the regime's revolutionary ideals and plays a leading role in planning and executing Iran's military operations, both directly and through proxy groups. Domestically, despite economic hardships, the Iranian government has maintained a degree of popular support, particularly among hardliners who see Iran's actions as necessary to defend the country's sovereignty and Islamic values. This support gives the government the domestic legitimacy it needs to continue its confrontational policies abroad. Iran has carried out two notable attacks on Israel in recent years, heightening tensions between the two countries. The first attack involved drone strikes aimed at Israeli military targets, believed to be part of Iran's wider strategy to expand its influence in the region. The second attack saw the launch of missiles toward Israel from Iranian-backed militia groups in Syria and Lebanon. Both attacks were retaliatory strikes, in response to Israel's strikes against Iranian interests in Syria. Israel's response has been swift and powerful, utilizing advanced military technology to neutralize Iran's threats. The Israeli government has made it clear that it will not tolerate any Iranian aggression, and it has conducted multiple airstrikes on Iranian positions in Syria as a countermeasure. As Iran continues to develop its nuclear program, the stakes are rising. Will Iran become the next nuclear power, and what will the global consequences be if it does? With ongoing tensions and powerful allies on its side, Iran remains a critical player to watch in the ever-changing landscape of global politics.